Isstvan III burned in silence, not the roaring, triumphant fire of the Great Crusade, but cold, methodical annihilation. Virus bombs fell like black rain from the heavens, bursting across the loyal cities of the planet. In seconds, the air itself became a weapon, flesh sloughed from bone, oceans of humanity dissolved into steaming sludge. And far above, the warships of the Imperium watched without mercy. This was the day the Imperium began to die, not with a single blade or a sudden betrayal spoken aloud, but with an order given calmly, clinically, by the War Master of mankind himself, HorusHeresy. To understand how the Imperium reached this moment, we must drift backward through time, to an age when the galaxy still believed in unity, when the Emperor of mankind walked openly among his sons, and the stars were being reclaimed in his name. The Great Crusade was not merely a conquest. It was a promise, across a million worlds. The Imperium spread the idea that humanity would never again stand alone. Old night had shattered civilizations, isolated planets, and birthed horrors beyond counting. But now, the Emperor had returned with his legions, 20 Primarchs forged in secret, each a demigod of war, each leading an army of gene-crafted warriors. At their head stood Horus, the first found, the favored son, the one the Emperor trusted above all others. Horus was not the strongest of the Primarchs, nor the most brilliant, nor the most brutal, but he was something far more dangerous. He was beloved by his brothers, by his legion, by the men and women who marched beneath the Aquila. Where others inspired awe or fear, Horus inspired loyalty. So when the Emperor chose to withdraw from the crusade, to return to Terra and labor in silence upon a secret project, he named Horus War Master, commander of all Imperial forces. It was meant as an honor. It became a wound. The Emperor did not explain his departure. He did not confide his true purpose. And in that absence, doubt began to grow. Not loudly, not all at once, but like a hairline fracture spreading through stone. Horus felt it first. Every order questioned, every compliance action weighed against political compromise. The Imperium he commanded was changing, governed increasingly by mortal administrators, by the Council of Terra, by laws and ties rather than brotherhood and oaths. And Horus, once the Emperor's blade, began to wonder if he had been replaced. The fracture widened on the moon of Davin. There, during a campaign meant to crush a minor rebellion, Horus was struck down by a blade steeped in the warp. Anathame, a weapon not merely meant to kill, but to corrupt. As his life ebbed away, he was carried into a place older than reason, a lodge hidden from reality. And there, the gods of chaos whispered to him. They did not scream. They did not threaten. They showed him visions, carefully chosen truths wrapped in lies. A future where the Emperor ruled alone as a god. A future where the Primarchs were discarded. A future where Horus was remembered only as a tool. When Horus awoke, he was healed, but something within him had died. He returned to Crusade changed, quieter, colder, and more distant. And one by one, he began to test the loyalties of his brothers. Some recoiled, some hesitated, and some, already resentful, already proud, already angry, listened. The word bearers, the world eaters, the Emperor's children, the Death Guard. The Imperium did not hear the crack forming at its heart. And so we return to Isstvan III, a world chosen not for its strategic value, but for its usefulness as a lie. Horus declared a purge. Traitors within his own legions, warriors still loyal to the Emperor. They were ordered plainside under the pretense of compliance. Then the virus bombs fell. This was not war. It was erasure. Yet even here, the Imperium refused to die quietly. Deep beneath the poisoned skies, loyal space marines still lived, Garviel Loken among them, standing defiant amid the ruins, breathing through failing filters, gripping bolters with shaking hands. They would not be remembered in statues or triumphs, but their stand would echo through eternity. And as the fires of Isstvan III smoldered, the galaxy crossed a threshold it could never return from. The HorusHeresy had truly begun. The loyalists of Isstvan III did not die as Horus had intended. Beneath skies turned poisonous and black, amid cities reduced to bone and ash, pockets of resistance endured. Space Marines, once brothers to the fleet above, rose from the ruins like ghosts, their armor scarred, their lungs burning and their faith unbroken. Gravel Lycan stood among them, once a captain of the Luna Wolves, now branded a traitor by the very legion he had loved. Lycan moved through the wreckage with a quiet, terrible clarity. There was no confusion left in him, no doubt, only purpose. Horus had made his choice, and so had Lycan. They gathered survivors where they could. Luna Wolves, Emperor's children, World Eaters, Death Guard, warriors who had not bent the knee, who had not listened when the War Master whispered of necessity and sacrifice. They were few, they were wounded, but they were still Astartes, and they would not kneel. For days, the traitor fleet believed Isstvan III was silent, dead, purged. The War Master allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The deed, he believed, was done. The rod had been burned away. But war, like faith, has a way of enduring beyond reason. The Loyalists struck back with fury born of betrayal. Ambushes flared in the ruins. Vox traffic crackled with defiance. Traitor patrols vanished into smoke and rubble, never to return. The planet was not quiet, it was waiting. When Horus realized the truth, his response was not rage, it was resolve. He ordered the legions to descend. Drop pods screamed to the poisoned sky, slamming into the corpse world with seismic force. Brother fought brother in streets, still slicked with chemical death. Chainblade met chainblade. Bolter fire echoed through hollow cathedrals of stone. Names once spoken with pride became curses shouted across gunfire. This was not the clean extermination Horus had planned. This was civil war. Loken fought like a man already dead. Every strike was fueled by memory, of camaraderie, of laughter aboard the vengeful spirit, of a time when the Imperium had felt righteous. He knew they could not win. But victory was no longer the point. To resist was to bear witness. Above the planet, the War Master watched the battle unfold, his expression unreadable. Each loyalist still standing was another reminder of what he was becoming, of what he had already done. Yet even now, Horus did not see himself as a villain. He believed he was saving humanity. That belief hardened as reports came in from across the crusade. Compliance actions turning bloody. Primarchs questioning orders. The Emperor still silent on Terra, still distant, still withholding the truth. In that silence, Horus acted. He could not allow doubt to spread unchecked. And so the next move was made, not in open rebellion, but in careful deception. A call went out to Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, to Vulcan of the Salamanders, to Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard. A warning of treachery. Horus told them the elements within the legions had rebelled, that Isstvan III was proof of contained purge, that their presence was needed to bring justice swiftly and decisively. And they believed him, because Horus had been their brother, because betrayal still seemed impossible. The loyalist survivors on Isstvan III were finally overwhelmed. One by one they fell not forgotten but unheard. Their deaths brought nothing measurable, no strategic gain, no reversal of fate. But they did something else. They made retreat impossible. The Imperium had crossed a line soaked in its own blood. There could be no reconciliation now, no quiet correction. The galaxy had been shown the truth, even if only a handful understood it. Horus Lupercal had chosen his path, and far away, on Terra, the Emperor continued his work, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge that the fire he had lit among the stars was now turning inward. The storm was gathering, and its next strike would be far greater than Isstvan III. The drop sites of Isstvan V were chosen with care, not for their beauty, there was none, but for the way the land opened itself like a wound. Black plains of volcanic glass stretched beneath a sky perpetually choked with ash. The ground was cracked and uneven, scarred by ancient tectonic violence. It was a world that had learned long ago how to endure suffering. Horus knew it would soon learn again. The message he sent was precise, urgent, filled with the tone of brotherhood and necessity. A rebellion had spread among the legions, he said. It had to be crushed swiftly, decisively, before the Imperium fractured beyond repair. Ferrus Manus came without hesitation. The Gorgon of Medusa had never been a man of subtlety. He believed in strength and clarity, in the honesty of the blade. If Horus called for aid, Ferrus would answer, with iron and fire. Vulcan followed, burdened by doubt but bound by duty. Corvus Corax came as well, quiet as a shadow, already uneasy with the shape of the truth forming in his mind. They were not alone. 7 legions assembled in orbit above Isstvan V. Loyalists and traitors side by side, banners flying beneath the same Aquila. The illusion was perfect, the lie complete. When the first wave descended, the betrayal had not yet revealed itself. Ferrus Manus led the assault personally, his iron hands striking hard and fast against the supposed rebel positions. The salamanders and Raven Guard followed, spreading out across the broken plains. Their goal was annihilation, their purpose purification. And then the sky fell silent. No supporting fire, no reinforcements, only the sound of bolters turning behind them. The second wave came down like judgment. World eaters, Emperor's children, Death Guard, Word Bearers, Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, traitors all. They did not announce themselves. They did not hesitate. They opened fire into the backs of those who had trusted them. Loyalist formations collapsed in seconds. Vox channels filled with disbelief, with shouted denials, with the raw sound of faith breaking. This was the Drop Site Massacre. Ferrus Manus realized the truth too late. He charged Fulgrim through a storm of fire, iron hands crackling with power, roaring not in fear but in betrayal. The 2 Primarchs met amid the carnage, brothers forged by the same father, now separated by an unbridgeable abyss. Fulgrim begged him to understand. Ferrus refused. Their duel was swift and terrible, and when it ended, Ferrus Manus lay dead upon the blackened earth, his silver hands severed, his legion shattered around him. With his death, something else died as well. Hope. Vulcan was captured, not slain, broken again and again by Conrad Kurz. Kept alive only to suffer, a symbol of cruelty unrestrained. Corvus Corax escaped into the ash with the remnants of his legion, wounded in body and spirit, carrying guilt that would never fade. The Loyalists were not defeated through superior strategy. They were betrayed into extinction. When the massacre ended, the plains of Isstvan V were layered with the dead. Astartes' armor lay twisted and broken. Legion colors ground into the ash. The Imperium's finest had been butchered by those they had called brothers only hours before. Horus did not walk the battlefield. He did not need to. The deed was done. The heresy was no longer a hidden rot. It was an open wound bleeding across the galaxy. Half the legions of Astartes had turned against their father. The Imperium's shield was broken, its sword shattered in its own hand. Yet even in victory, the traitors paid a price. The Loyalists did not die easily. The Raven Guard's ambushes crippled supply lines. The Salamander's resistance bled the Night Lords and Word Bearers. The Iron Hands, though leaderless, would never forget. From this point forward, there would be no swift march on Terra. Only war, endless, grinding, soul-devouring war. And as the traitor fleets turned toward the heart of the Imperium, the Emperor of Mankind finally looked up from his work and saw the firestorm racing toward him. The galaxy did not erupt all at once. It fractured. After Isstvan III, the Imperium did not fall into sudden chaos. Instead, it began to tear apart along old fault lines, resentments long buried, oaths stretched thin, loyalties tested by isolation and fear. Astropathic messages went unanswered. Fleets vanished into the void. Entire systems went silent, their allegiance uncertain and their fate unknown. This was Horus' true genius. Not speed, but confusion. The traitor war master did not drive directly for Terra. He bled the Imperium first. Supply routes were severed. Forged worlds were turned or annihilated. Loyalist legions were scattered, forced into isolated wars they could not win quickly, if at all. Every delay bought Horus time. Every unanswered distress call deepened the wound. At the center of this widening storm, the word-bearers worked in silence and shadow, long before Horus ever fell. Lorgar had already abandoned the imperial truth. Where others saw chaos as a weapon, the word-bearers saw revelation. They did not merely fight the Emperor. They preached against him. World after world was offered up in ritual sacrifice. Cities became altars. Populations were slaughtered not for conquest, but for devotion. The warp grew restless, swollen with belief in blood, and the veil between realities thinned. The war was no longer purely material. It was becoming something far worse. On Terra, the Emperor watched the Imperium unravel and did not move to stop it. Instead, he sealed himself within the Imperial Palace, withdrawing from the galaxy at the moment it needed him most. The defenses of Terra were raised to impossible heights. The palace became a fortress layered with void shields, guns, and labyrinthine kill zones. But more importantly, the Emperor turned his attention inward. Beneath the palace, hidden from all but the most trusted, the Webway project continued. A final, desperate attempt to free humanity from the warp forever. If he succeeded, chaos would be starved. Humanity would no longer need navigators, astropaths, or the dangerous tides of the immaterium. The heresy, in time, would wither and die, but the Emperor needed time, and Horus knew it. So the traitor struck where the Emperor was weakest, not in battle, but in secrecy. Magnus the Red, pre-March of the Thousand Suns, had foreseen disaster. Through forbidden sorcery, he glimpsed Horus' fall and the coming of civil war. Desperate to warn his father, Magnus committed the greatest sin of all. He shattered the wards around the Imperial Palace. His psychic scream tore through the warp and slammed into Terra like a meteor. The Webway gate exploded open, flooding the hidden tunnels beneath the palace with demons. In a single catastrophic moment, the Emperor's great work was undone. The Emperor was forced to act. He took the Golden Throne, not as a symbol, but as a prison. Bound to it, his will now held the demonic tide at bay, sealing the breach with constant, unbearable effort. From that moment onward, he could no longer walk the stars. The Emperor of Mankind was trapped. Horus had not struck Terra with guns or legions. He had forced the Emperor to chain himself. Elsewhere, Prospero burned. The space wolves descended upon the Thousand Suns' homeworld under orders twisted by deception. What should have been censure became annihilation. Magnus, broken by guilt and loss, finally gave himself fully to chaos. His legion damned alongside him. Another brother lost. Another bridge burned. By the time the Imperium understood the scope of betrayal, it was already too late. The heresy was no longer a war that could be won through reconciliation or reason. It had become a war of extinction. And in the long, blood-soaked path toward Terra, Horus Lupercalia gathered his strength, knowing the final confrontation would not be decided by armies alone, but by faith, by sacrifice, and by the death of a dream. The march toward Terra was not a straight line. It was a slow, grinding collapse of everything the Imperium believed itself to be. Horus advanced like a closing fist, tightening his grip one system at a time. Loyalist strongholds flared and died in isolation. Reinforcements arrived too late, or not at all. Messages, once sent in confidence, now carried only desperation or lies. The Imperium was learning a cruel truth. It was too vast to save itself quickly. At the edges of the war, loyalist Primarchs still fought on, unaware how completely the galaxy had shifted beneath their feet. Rub out Geoman, cut off an Ultramar, waged a war of survival and governance, try and preserve something, anything, of the Emperor's vision. Lionel Johnson hunted in the darkness, striking traitor fleets with merciless precision, yet always arriving just after the true damage had been done. They were powerful, but they were alone. At the heart of Horus' advance lay the war for Beta Garmin, a grinding, apocalyptic campaign fought across shattered worlds and dead suns. Titan legions clashed like walking gods, their weapons scarring continents, their machine spirits screaming as they were torn apart. The ground trembled beneath their steps. The skies burned with falling void ships. This was not a battle meant to be won swiftly. It was meant to exhaust. Every loyalist Titan, destroyed, was irreplaceable. Every mechanism Forge World lost pushed Terra closer to isolation. Horus understood that when the final blow came, it must fall upon an enemy already bleeding, already weakened. Yet even as the War Master closed in, something within him was fraying. Chaos had elevated Horus beyond mortality, but it was not a gift freely given. The gods demanded more violence, more devotion, more surrender. Horus' body began to fail under the strain of his ascension. His thoughts grew erratic. His moments of clarity shortened. And in those moments, doubt crept back in. Was this truly his war? Or was he now only a vessel? The traitor Primarchs felt it too. They bickered, plotted, and schemed, their unity held together by ambition and fear rather than brotherhood. Fulcrum vanished into excess and obsession. Angoon burned with endless rage, barely controllable. Mortar Ion brooded, his loyalty poisoned by bitterness rather than conviction. Horus was no longer surrounded by brothers. He was surrounded by weapons. On Terra, the Emperor waited. The defenses were complete. The palace bristled with firepower beyond comprehension. Loyalist legions gathered where they could, blood angels, imperial fists, and white scars, preparing for a siege they knew they could not truly win. And still, the Emperor did not speak. Not to Horus, not to the galaxy. Only Salvador the Sigil Light moved between factions, holding together what little remained of imperial unity through will alone. He knew the truth the others did not, that the Emperor was running out of time. Every moment spent upon the Golden Throne burned him away. Every second holding back the warp brought him closer to something worse than death. When Horus finally reached the Sol System, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. This was no longer rebellion. It was the end of an age. The traitor fleet emerged from the warp like a storm given form, thousands of warships blotting out the stars, their hulls twisted by corruption, their banners torn and defiled. Terra lay before them, the cradle of humanity, the final battlefield. And as the guns began to fire, as the void filled with wreckage and flame, Horus Lupercal stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit and made his final choice. There would be no mercy, only victory, or oblivion. The siege of Terra did not begin with a single thunderous moment. It unfolded like a slow suffocation. The void around Terra became a killing field. Loyalist fleets fought with the desperation of the condemned, every maneuver measured against dwindling ammunition and failing hulls. The traitor armada pressed inward relentlessly, accepting losses without pause, without grief. They had been promised transcendence or annihilation. Both were enough. As the outer defenses fell, The skies of Terra darkened beneath burning debris. Fragments of ships rained down like meteors, igniting the atmosphere, scarring continents. Billions watched the heavens burn, knowing, at last, that the war had come home. Upon the walls of the Imperial Palace, Rogel Dorn waited. The Praetorian of Terra had turned the palace into a fortress without equal, bastion upon bastion, kill zones layered with brutal logic. Every approach mapped, every weakness sealed with stone, steel, and sacrifice. Dorn did not believe in hope. He believed in preparation. Beside him stood Sanguinius, radiant even beneath a sky choked with ash. The angel of Baal had foreseen his own death, yet he did not falter. His presence alone steadied those around him, human and Astartes alike. Where Dorn was iron, Sanguinius was light. The traitor legions made planetfall in waves. Iron warriors battered the outer walls with merciless precision. World eaters hurled themselves into the breach in frenzied assaults, caring nothing for survival. Death Guard advanced through fire and chemical death, unstoppable, patient, and inevitable. The ground war became a nightmare without end. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. The palace bled, but it did not break. Each meter of ground was paid for in corpses. The loyalists fought not for victory, but for delay. Every hour gained was another breath for the Emperor upon the throne. Deep within the palace, Salvador the Sigil Light felt that time slipping away. The webway breach strained against the Emperor's will. Demons clawed at the seals from beyond reality. The golden throne screamed under the load it was never meant to bear alone. And still, the Emperor remained silent. Above Terra, Horus grew impatient. The siege was working, but too slowly. The gods whispered, urged, and demanded resolution. Horus could feel himself unraveling, his power burning him from within. If the siege dragged on, he feared he would lose himself entirely. So he made a fatal decision. The shields of the vengeful spirit were lowered. A challenge, an invitation. Horus knew the Emperor would come, not as a general, not as a ruler, but as a father. Teleport beacons flared. A strike force assembled in desperate haste. Sanguinius, Regal Dorn, the Emperor of mankind. They boarded the traitor flagship, knowing the odds, knowing there would be no retreat. The teleportation scattered them across the ship, whether by malfunction or design. None could say. Sanguinius found Horus first. Their duel was brief, devastating, and one-sided. The angel fought with everything he was, every vision of hope and mercy driving his blade. But Horus was no longer merely a primarch. He was a chosen of chaos. Sanguinius fell. His death echoed through the warp like a scream that would never fade. When the Emperor finally confronted Horus, he did not strike at once. He hesitated, and in that moment, the fate of the Imperium was sealed. The chamber was vast and broken, its walls warped by unreality, its air heavy with the presence of gods. Horus Lupercal stood at its center. He was barely recognizable now, his armor bloated with dark power, his form towering, radiant with sickly, warp-born majesty. This was not simply the War Master of old, nor even a Primarch. This was something else. Something raised far beyond humanity, yet hollowed by that very ascension. And before him stood the Emperor of mankind, not enthroned, not distant, but present. For the first time since the heresy began, father and son faced one another without armies, without intermediaries, without lies left unspoken. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, balanced on the edge of a single decision. The Emperor spoke Horus' name, and Horus laughed. He spoke of betrayal, of abandonment, of a future stolen. He accused the Emperor of planning to cast aside his sons, to rule alone as a god while they faded into irrelevance. The warp echoed his words, amplifying them, feeding on his fury and grief. The Emperor did not deny everything. That was the cruelest truth of all. He tried to reach what remained of Horus, to remind him of unity, of purpose, of the dream they had once shared. And for a moment, just a moment, the gods watching to the veil faltered. Horus hesitated. Then the illusion shattered. Horus struck. The duel that followed was not merely physical. It was metaphysical, mythic, fought across layers of reality. Each blow cracked the fabric of the ship. Time stuttered. Space folded. The Emperor was wounded, again and again, by a being empowered beyond any mortal measure. And still, he refused to kill his son, until Horus did something unforgivable. A lone human, an Imperial soldier, small and terrified, lost in the madness, intervened. He raised his weapon against Horus in a futile gesture of loyalty. Horus erased it without a thought, annihilating him utterly. In that instant, the Emperor understood. There was nothing left to save. What stood before him was no longer his son, but a weapon of the warp, a doorway through which chaos would devour all humanity. The Emperor unleashed his full power. The light that followed was blinding, absolute, final. Horus screamed as the warp was burned out of him, his soul unmade, erased so completely that even the gods recoiled. There would be no resurrection, no return. Horus Lupercal died utterly and forever, but victory had a cost beyond measure. The Emperor collapsed, his body broken, his essence shattered by the battle. Rogel Dorn arrived too late, finding only ruin, Horus' corpse and the Emperor dying. There was no triumph, only survival. The traitor fleets faltered as Horus' death rippled outward. Some fled, some turned on one another. The Heresy, leaderless, began to devour itself. Terra was saved, but only barely and only temporarily. The Emperor was carried back to the Golden Throne, not as a ruler, but as a sacrifice, and as the machinery closed around him, as his consciousness was bound eternally to the throne to hold back the warp and guide humanity's fragile light. An age ended. The dream of a united, enlightened Imperium died with Horus. What remained would be something far darker. The Imperium did not celebrate its survival. It mourned it. In the aftermath of the siege, Terra was a wounded world. Its skies were thick with ash and debris, its continents scarred by bombardment, its population shattered by loss on a scale beyond comprehension. Trillions had lived beneath the Emperor's light. Uncounted billions had died to preserve it. And at the center of all things, upon the Golden Throne, the Emperor of mankind endured. Not alive in any sense humanity could truly understand. Not dead, bound to the throne's ancient machinery. His broken body sustained by sacrifice and suffering. His mind stretched across the warp to hold back annihilation. Every day, 1,000 souls were fed to the throne, so that he might continue, so that humanity might continue. The Emperor would never speak again. The dream he had carried across the stars, the dream of reason, of unity without superstition, of a humanity free from gods and monsters, was gone. It had died aboard the vengeful spirit, alongside Horus and Sanguinius, in a storm of light and blood. What rose in its place was not what the Emperor had intended. The Imperium rebuilt itself not on hope, but on fear. The imperial truth was quietly abandoned. In its place grew worship. Shrines were raised where laboratories once stood. Prayers replaced understanding. The Emperor, who had denied divinity all his life, became a god in the eyes of the masses. Not because he wished it, but because humanity needed something to believe in, something eternal. The surviving Primarchs went their separate ways. Rogel Dorn remained, unyielding, guarding Terra's penance for a failure he would never forgive himself for. Guilliman returned to Ultramar and began to reshape the Imperium into something that could survive without its father. Codified, rigid, constrained by law. Others vanished into exile, grief, or silence. Some would never be seen again. The traitors did not find peace in defeat. Those who fled into the Eye of Terror were not forgiven by the gods they had served. They were twisted, fractured, damned. Their legions became war bands. Their brotherhoods rotted into endless infighting and madness. The Long War began, not as a campaign of conquest, but as a vendetta without end. 10,000 years of hatred, 10,000 years of war, and humanity endured, hardened, suspicious, brutal. The Imperium became a machine designed for survival at any cost. Innovation was forbidden. Mercy was weakness. Ignorance was safety. The stars were no longer a frontier hope, but a battlefield without end. This is the true legacy of the Horus Heresy. Not simply the fall of a war master, but the death of possibility. Every bolter fired in the 41st millennium, every world burned for compliance, every prayer whispered in fear, all of it traces back to that first betrayal, to Isstvan, to terror, to a father who loved his son too much to strike, and a son who believed himself abandoned. The Imperium did not collapse that day. It calcified, and so, when we look upon the galaxy as it is now grim, endless, locked in perpetual war, we are not seeing a civilization at its height. We are seeing a civilization in mourning, still surviving, still fighting, still refusing to die, because on the day Horus fell, the Imperium learned the only lesson it would ever truly remember. There is no peace among the stars, only an eternity of war.